what were the three biggest lessons you learned from observing Steve Jobs, from communicating with him, and from the way he left the world?
Well, in the case of, it's like, what are the lessons? One of them, which he understood intuitively, which was that when you're wrong, you change. Now, I mean, there's different ways of phrasing it. It's like that there's no upside in being wrong. And some people think they need to win the argument. And Steve actually understood that was never the point. It was, you want to get to the truth quickly. But he also understood that at an intuitive level, that because of the power of his personality, it actually could distort the process. And that was part of his learning as he went through this, was the recognizing, what was him recognizing that his abilities, his like superpowers, could actually get in the way of him finding out things. So I'll give a couple examples. One of them, which would surprise people, was that we had a board of directors, because in 1995, at the end, we went public, and this is like a big public offering. We were the second largest IPO of 1995, only after Netscape.
And when did Toy Story come out?
In 95.
95.
So we went public 1 week afterwards.
Wow.
So when we were doing the road trip, and part of the road trip
showing the movie
was, well, actually it wasn't showing the movie. It was telling people that we had a new technology that was going to change filmmaking. So now it's a complete confidence that this film is going to be a big success.
Wow.
But he could say to them, nobody else can do this. There isn't anything like it. It's going to change the industry. And we've got the people that changed the technology, and they're doing the content. So that's what this company is. But we're not going to go public until after the movie comes out, because we think that we should show you how big this is.
Wow.
Before we go public.
Smart.
So that was what we did for the few months leading up to going public.
You were telling a story about the story.
Yes.
Wow.
And that we were going to prove it.
And you guys did.
And we did.
You proved it big.
So
what was that first week like? Toy Story launches, box office, and then you go public the next week later. What was that week like?
It was surreal.
What were the numbers of the box office and then going public?
Well, interestingly enough, what I remember at the time, because our whole group at the time would go to our computer graphics conference, which is SIGGRAPH, and for the most part, it's showing the newest technology. And we believed firmly, because we made short films, and they were actually, Academy Award-winning short films, and they're quite impactful, but they're short. And people would always pay attention on the outside to the technology. So when the film came out, the biggest question that we had, and everybody was looking for it, and all of the technology people were looking for it, was, what are the reviewers going to pay attention to? And what we found was that almost every review, there was at most 1 or 2 sentences about the new technology, and the rest of the review was about the movie.
Wow.
And that, for all of us, was like, that's the win. It wasn't about the technology.
It was about being a great movie.
Yes. And if we had done that, and we got people to buy into this world and watch it and feel it, then that was the win. And everybody understood it at every level in the company.
Wow.
And so that's what I remember, was reading those things to find out whether or not we had really accomplished what we wanted to do.
It's incredible. I mean, what I'm curious about is, how were you able to tap into the human mind and create emotional connections with audiences through these animations? How was this studied and executed for the last 30 years at such a high level? And how did you do that for that first movie?
Well, I will say that for the first movie, there was, it's one of those things where there is some luck in that group that first came in. We had always, in the history of both at New York Tech and then at Lucasfilm and then at Pixar, was to say we really want to hire the very best. And so I would say, well, we want to hire people who are smarter than I am. And I know other people say that, but because like what does that even mean? But it means that you don't want to be threatened by the people that you hire, and they just have to have these extraordinary skills. And so when they were building out our technical group, I mean, they were just really good. I mean, they had passed me in terms of their understanding of the technology, and John understood that too. So when he did his first hires, the first person he hired was Andrew Stanton, and then the second was Pete Docter, and then Joe Ranft came in, and then we brought in really to be an editor, except he turns out to have been this is like one of the best storytellers ever, is Lee Unkrich. So this is this amazing group of people that came together. And now part of it was we really had established a culture where that this was the right thing to do, is you aren't bringing in, you weren't even thinking about them as, who's going to be second to me? It's like, okay, who's really good? And it turns out that Andrew had this extraordinarily structural sense. So we didn't know that when we hired him.
Right.
It's just like it emerged because of the challenge. And Pete Docter had this incredible emotional core.
Wow.
And still does. I mean, he went on to do Up, Inside Out. It's like getting the emotion right. It's like who he is. And Lee has this actually phenomenal filmmaking sense of, okay, we're doing this, but you really have to get all these pieces right. And then the person that was Sharon Callahan initially, who was thinking about the lighting, and people aren't often aware of this, but the lighting is really important for conveying the emotions. And then the artist that we had, Ralph Eggleston, had a color palette for the movie, because it turns out the basic color changed throughout the movie, and it's this subtle thing that's affecting your perceptions.
Wow.
So, this is this amazing group of people. And the interesting thing about it was that none of these people had ever made a feature film before in their life.
Oh my goodness.
So we hadn't used computer graphics, but they also hadn't done a 2D film. They hadn't done any film. So
it's unbelievable.
Everybody is a beginner. They all had to figure it out.
And you're leading them.
Yeah.
How do you know? I mean, yeah, the emotional, the emotions you're able to pull out of people, in these films, through, you're a technology guy, but through the tech, through the art, through the color, through the lighting, through the sound design and the music, through the tonality of the voice actors, and bringing it all together to create a cohesive emotional story is unbelievable how you guys do this. And how you continue to do it, but how did you know how to put it all together?
Well, I mean, the way I thought at the time is how do you have a group that works together? Because I'm not a filmmaker. And I would, over time we developed a way of helping people, which ended up being called the Brain Trust. But my view was, when I went to these meetings, was, how do we make sure this group works together? Like, what are the things that make it work together, and what takes them off the rails? So it was to work out some principles for that. And it's fun to give notes to movie, but the truth was, there's only one movie in all those movies that I gave a note that I felt so strongly about that I had to push really hard to get it in there.
What was that?
It was in Monsters Incorporated.
What was the note?
Well, the note was, at one point near the end, the monster, Sully, has to scare this dummy, which is being videoed. That's like a training video. And you may recall that when he does this, he then looks up and he sees that the girl's right there, and he scares the bejesus out of this little girl, the one he loves. And he didn't mean to do it. But the original thing, what she saw was that she saw him on the monitor. So I looked at this and I said, you can't do this, because anybody that has a child remembers there are times when they may have done something that where their child was in danger, either because of themselves or it happened to them. And when that happens, it sears into your soul and you never forget it for as long as you live.
Wow.
And that for Sully, he needs to see that he was the cause of the thing that scared her, that it was not good enough to have her see it by the monitor. So there's some pushback on it. And, you know, I finally talked with Andrew, and so Andrew said, no, this is actually critical to the film. And I just felt, good. But that's it.
Right.
And so I can look and say, well, I did one at least.
One note in 30 movies. Yeah.
And but that wasn't my job.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the filmmakers. It wasn't my job. It was to say, okay, is this working well together? Why is it derailing? When does it go well? When doesn't it go well? And so that was the whole time. And then when Jim Morris came in, initially he came in as producer, and then he was our head of production, and then he was our general manager, and then he became the president. It was like, we're both like, we're in there just looking at the process, and what works, what doesn't work.
Right.
And you're just evolving it.
Right.
Over time.
I mean, you got pretty animated during this retelling the story with Monsters, Inc. What movie left you with the deepest amount of emotion when you watched it after it came out or in the process of making it? What was the movie that captivated you the most? I'm sure it's hard to say which one you liked the most, but was there a moment in a movie that really touched you in a way based on your own life experience, different than the other emotional moments in movies?
Well, it was, it's a little hard to say, because any emotion in a movie connects to watching the people go through this. So I can't even watch a movie in the same way that others do, because I'm actually seeing what took place.
The creators, the producers, everything before.
That's right.
To me, yeah.
I mean, they're just, these films all at the beginning have problems. It's just one thing after another. And we go through multiple steps and with different ways of trying to fix the problems. And in fact, it was one of the things I wanted to clarify with the expanded edition of the book, was that, I talked a fair amount about, failure and how it is part of the process. But I realized that it doesn't actually capture what takes place, because we all know that we learn from failures. And in fact, failure is kind of popular to talk about nowadays, about a way of learning. The reality is that we have two meanings to failure which are deeply built into us. So there's one meaning, which is that we know that we've had failures and we learn from them, and it's part of the process of learning. The other meaning is the one that we got in school, and that is, if you fail a class, it's because you screwed up, you didn't work hard enough, or you're dumb. Right? None of those are good meanings.
Right.
All right. Now you go out into business, bridges fail, relationships fail, companies fail. And in politics and business, failures are used as bludgeons with which to beat opponents. There is real and palpable fear behind failure. All right, so if we talk about failure, then it is almost possible for most people to emotionally disconnect those two concepts. And so I realized that, says that's what I observed, that at Pixar, well, we also say that failure is part of the process. It does happen.
Yes.
We don't actually use the terminology very much. Now, there are times when you have something which actually does fail, so we don't avoid it. You have to, like, if something really fails, you say it. But the terminology of making a film is, since we know they'll have problems, is we're trying to solve the problem. That solution didn't work. Let's try this. So the iterative process is we're trying it. Let's try this. And as long as the team is working well together, even if they haven't solved the problem, if they're working well together, we say, okay, keep going. It's a tough problem. And they know that. They know we have their back. And the only thing, the only real clue we have that we have to do a major change is if the crew begins to lose the confidence that a leader can actually get them there. They may like the leader. And this is not, I don't like them. It's more like I just don't have the confidence we're going to get there. And those things start to build. So we are aware of some of them because people will come and talk about some of the problems they've got. So you then start off, how do we help the person? How do we supplement them? Could we add somebody to the team to remove somebody? What are the things we can do behind the scene to help them? And if we get to the point where we can't do it, then we'll do a bigger change. And we essentially have failed. And it's tough because we picked the person to be the failure because we believe they can do it, because they're very good. So for them, it's actually a very difficult process to go through. And we've only had a couple of the directors who could survive this and stay with the company. And they're very valuable. And those who have stayed were actually incredible contributors, but it's emotionally hard for them to go through.
Right.
But one of those was with Ratatouille.
Mm-hmm.
And the man who designed it conceived of the idea of a lovely man. He's really very good. In fact, the look of the film that you see came from this guy.
Wow.
But the film was stuck, and they couldn't get out of it. And so at that point, due to other reasons that were honors, Brad Bird had finished Mission Impossible. He did that later.
Sure.
He had actually finished The Incredibles.
Uh-huh.
So he asked him to take it on.
Interesting.
And
now, when the movie is stuck, do you mean it's stuck in the beginning stages, or it's in post-production, or it's like the story needs to adjust?
Story is
so
stuck.
The story's not complete yet.
That's right.
So you've got the story, but you're like, well, we need changes here, or it's not really fully emotionally connecting, or the journey doesn't work. Is that what you mean?
Yes. But in the meantime, we're building the models. We can call the assets.
You're building the characters, the backgrounds, the animation. You're building it without the story complete.
That's right.
Wow.
So, and there are pieces of it that we think are working, so we'll start to make them. Because you can't make the whole thing at the end, so you need to start to make it.
You make like one scene. You're like, we like this part. We think this will work.
We think you're right. We think it's going to work. We might be wrong, so sometimes you may throw that away.
Really?
That's expensive.
So it's kind of like shooting a scene that you don't use, but you're got 1,000 people animating something and working on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to try things, you figure them out.
Sure.
Because what is the lighting? What's the character going to look like? How is this going to work? So they're doing all this work, but you can't get too far ahead of yourself.
If you don't have the story complete.
Yeah. So it's a tricky balance, but it's always a tricky balance.
Yeah.
I never confuse the personal power that somebody might have or their position with what was right. So it didn't matter if somebody was a better debater or could think faster than I could, or they were in a senior position. As I didn't mean they were right.